Caddis Maximus here. This time reviewing the Harbor Freight Gordon X-Acto knife, or they call it a hobby knife just because X-Acto is a trademark term. This thing was like $5 on the shelf. They actually have a 3-piece set of these, which is a more expensive $10 or $12 set. They have a few different sets of X-Acto knives there, hobby knives, precision knives. Actually, I was working on shaping a little piece of plastic and already managed to cut myself with this, so the blade's hardly sharp enough to cut you. And actually, this is one of those Harbor Freight items. I'm sure there's a million of these on Amazon, all made by the same manufacturer, but I kind of like this more modern take. I haven't looked at many more modern X-Acto products, but I have a couple older ones, and actually I've always really liked this style one, which is just this really fine pencil style, and that's still to this day one of my favorite ones just because of how thin it is. I have one of the heavy-duty X-Acto handles. This is an older one when they were still made in America. I'm sure they aren't made in the USA anymore, although they may be. I would be surprised. Those little car air freshener trees always used to come in pine, but now they're in a bunch of different flavors. Those things are still made in America. I was kind of surprised. Let's take a closer look at it. They do have a pretty nice protective cap. What's kind of interesting is initially I thought it was not super great, but they've kind of made this little ridge or an undercut in there. So when you put on the cap, and let's do it carefully. You always want to do that carefully on a X-Acto knife. No, it doesn't. There we go. It's actually pretty tight in there. And even if you drop it, it would stay on. So I thought, hey, that's actually pretty handy. That might be a little bit more reasonable, preventing you from getting accidentally cut. It does have a rubberized overmolding. It's an all metal construction. We can see the metal actually goes all the way through, and then they slip a cover on. Even this is hard plastic, this red area, but it feels a little bit softer than what would be considered super hard plastic. Changing blades is pretty easy because both halves is screwed together, so you just loosen it a little bit, and then you can just pop the blade right out. And the Harbor Freight does use standard X-Acto shank type blades, so you don't have to worry about compatibility. Something I thought was interesting is they have this little bump right here. I'm not quite sure why. It wouldn't be so you could have grip. I figured it was an alignment thing because one of the features of this one is you can turn the handle, loosen up, and then you can adjust the blade, say in a particular position. Then you can, it's a little difficult. You kind of hold the blade and tighten up the collar. Oh, wow, that won't actually work. I didn't know that lower portion. This lower portion will spin freely in relation to the blade, so that's why it seemed weird. But you can get it tightened up, and then you can have the blade, I basically like here, where it's 90 degrees to the bump. So I figured it's an orientation type of thing, but it's a little fidgety to get it lined up here. It does come with a little blade pack, and I actually like that. I like having a nice little compact blade. It comes with 5 separate blades. I believe they are all exactly the same. Indeed, they are. And it has space for probably another 5 blades, so pretty decent there. And then knocking this thing apart, we'll actually pop the little blade out. We can disassemble this thing and see what we got inside. That is actually a little aluminum ring. I'm actually pretty surprised. There's our aluminum body, and then here's our pull rod, and that's just one piece of aluminum. It's all aluminum, so it's not super duty. It's not even brass. I have, looking around online, I did see some brass X-Acto type knives, so there are some very premium ones out there, but I'm not going to complain too much for this Harbor Freight Gordon. I was initially a little surprised that the normal non-coupon price was $5, but I think that's okay for this. Primarily because there's a bunch of machine work involved in getting the tip machined and then the 2 barrel halves. There's actually quite a bit of work to put together a tool like this. And, they probably could make it cheaper, but really its fit and finish isn't super bad. Actually, let me get that sunk down in there a little deeper. And get this back on here before I cut myself with this. Things like having a cap. It's a little fidgety to get on, but it's nice to have a cap that stays on. Dual mold, injection molding there. Nice little, finger grip. And then having an overall kind of rubberized soft coating. And then it's a bit larger, so people who may not actually like super thin barrels may like just the little bit larger ergonomics of this. I think it's actually a decent little tool. And when you can get it for like $4 or something with a coupon, or even $5, actually, I don't think it's too bad at all. Oh, one thing somebody had mentioned online, and I had done a measurement. So this X-Acto knife actually has a genuine X-Acto blade, and it is the same thickness as the Harbor Freight blade. So the Harbor Freight are the same thickness as the X-Acto. So differences would be difference in quality of steel and maybe the edge. And I'll finish this off this review with trying to get a real close look at the edge. So here's a genuine X-Acto knife blade. Let's get a little bit more zoom. How much zoom do I have? Oh, I can get more zoom. There we go. You can actually see a little second bevel in there, so it's a double grind. That's one of the reasons these X-Acto knife blades are just so... I do want to emphasize safety. Even though these X-Acto knives, people always seem to not respect them because they're little knives, but they are razor super sharp. And man, they will cut you pretty bad if you slip, so always be real careful. Let's take a look at the edge on this. Let's give it a little wipe. Change that angle. See, that has a double grind on it too, but you can see the reflection is much wider at the base than it is at the tip. And if we take another close look at the genuine X-Acto blade, wow, right there it's actually making like a little star flares. That's cool. But we can see that the width of you can see it's a really white line, and you can see that's very even across the entire edge. So that's where the smaller differences show up. Like when you do buy a genuine X-Acto, is just more expensive and better grinding. And actually, I was kind of surprised to see it be that obvious. So definitely, Harbor Freight blades do not have the best grind on them, but this is a nice little X-Acto knife blade holder. Anyway, I'll leave the part number in the description. And I was also going to mention, I really appreciate everybody and the nice comments on my toolbox tour. Part of the reason I did delay it is because of the situation my toolbox is in. Let me zoom out just a little bit here. The second reason I did it was because when I get a new toolbox, and I'll eventually do another toolbox tour sometime down the road, maybe incremental ones, where they're more displayed out, and I'll do it like sectionally so people can kind of get a good look at what all the wrenches, if they were laid out like a more normal toolbox, would look like. And yes, a lot of people mentioned this tour in that tour that it was obvious the drawers that they did not see. And yeah, that toolbox is like that, and it doesn't have prying tools. It doesn't have punches or chisels, you know, striking or struck tools. It doesn't have crimpers. It doesn't have pliers. It doesn't have the pry bars. I mean, it's just too much. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.